have also seen some of the limitations with that, which is that when some decisions then go into the government machine, and they perhaps come out in a way that you hadn't thought they would, you're not necessarily able to influence those as much as possible. But look, I'm deputy leader of the Labour Party. I'm directly elected by members, trade unions, and MPs, and I have my own kind of mandate in that job. And I want to make sure that we've got a successful Labour government that's really delivering on our values and delivering on our promise.
Earlier this morning, I spoke to Lucy Powell, the current deputy leader of the Labour Party. In the interview, she talked about her hopes of returning to the front lines of the cabinet under Andy Burnham. But I began by asking her about her demands for curbs on the use of social media at election time.
Yeah, well, as you know, Adam, the broadcasters are very tightly regulated during an election period. They're bound by impartiality rules, balance. They have to make sure that what they put on the news, on radio and TV, is accurate, and they've looked at those things. But no such regulation or rules exists on social media, and we increasingly seeing the widespread spreading of mis and disinformation, the use of bot farms, foreign actors, state actors and others trying to distort debate and feed mis and disinformation, especially to do with our democracy during election time. So we've got this big elections bill going through Parliament at the moment, which is doing some great things like votes at 16 and clamping down on overseas donations. And I think that's a really good opportunity for us to really think about and strengthen that bill to ensure that there are at least some, if not as tight as it is for broadcasters, but I would argue it should be, some regulations around social media, around what information and news they can amplify and share during election time if it's not been checked for its accuracy or balance.
I mean, many people regard that as desirable, but the question is what Ofcom or indeed the government could do, as you say, with a system that, operates internationally.
Well, absolutely, but we have to. We have to do it. We're seeing lots of examples now of the undermining of democracy. In fact, the undermining of our democratic process being widely questioned by people that aren't even real, or that are being pushed by foreign state actors through our social media. We're seeing the widespread sharing of stories, so-called stories about candidates and individuals that are not true, and we're not seeing a balanced debate. So, this is something we have to tackle. We've already brought in the Online Safety Act, which has now given Ofcom new powers to begin to regulate aspects of social media. Those powers were diluted by the previous Tory government, but particularly in relation to our democracy now, which we are really seeing being undermined. We've got to take action and strengthen the regulatory framework, and if that means giving new powers to Ofcom, if that means strengthening Ofcom further in terms of its capacity, then we must do that.
I mean, it's a matter of record, for example, that Elon Musk has tweeted more about British politics with his particular right-wing stance than he has about SpaceX, his own company. But he does own the platform X. I mean, you couldn't possibly ban him from being on it, could you, in this country?
Well, we can certainly regulate what gets promoted here. I mean, we can't just give up and say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Therefore, it's okay for someone with a particular view who's extremely wealthy, who lives in another country, to really shape the democratic process in this country with views and opinions and information that is often wrong. It's certainly not balanced. Is shaping the outcome potentially of elections in this country. That is the role of government, to protect our democracy and to make sure that elections are free and fair. That's absolutely the foundation of
I
our.
mean, perhaps one of the things that might be more simple was to include online spending as part of the spending of political parties, and you could put a cap on that.
Well, potentially. I mean, to be obviously the political parties themselves, who have a lot of activity on social media, are regulated, because their behaviour is regulated by the Electoral Commission, by returning officers. So there are systems there to regulate and oversee and hold to account candidates and political parties for what they're doing. This is more about those outside of that, really, and what they're pushing and propagating on social media. And yeah, I mean, you give a good example of Elon Musk there. Not just him himself and his own individual tweets, seems obsessed with our political debate in this country, but also as the owner of X, and I think we all experience this, anybody who's on that platform, the turning up and turning down of the amplification through algorithms that he's got in his control, so that people, without realizing it, are seeing a very potentially a very partisan view of something, because the algorithms have been turned up or turned down in order to push through the feed. So this is a significantly growing area, and that's why legislation and the regulatory framework needs to keep up with it. We do have this long-standing tradition in this country of an election period, which does govern broadcasters and what they can do during an election period. And I really strongly feel it's not beyond the wit of man for us to think about, and to come up with. And I've been talking to lots of the experts in this field about how we could extend that to other places that people get their news and information, which these days is particularly via social media.
Are you saying this as someone who expects to be able to act on this as a minister in Andy Burnham's government?
I'm saying this as the deputy leader of the Labour Party, and so someone who has a big responsibility for these issues across the Labour Party already. We've got, as I say, we've got this elections bill, which I worked on when I was in government previously as leader of the House of Commons. It's having its sort of final stages in the House of Commons just at the moment, so it's a very live conversation, and then it will go into the Lords. There's a number of amendments down to that bill already via my colleague Emily Darlington, and I'm looking at tabling a number of other amendments in this regard next week ahead of the report stage in the House of Commons.
You made the point when you ran successfully for the deputy leadership of the Labour Party that under Sir Keir Starmer you intended on staying out of the government. There's clearly going to be a change now. Does that apply if Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister? Would you still want to stay out of the government as deputy leader?
Well, I have done this job politically. I really felt that we needed to inject some of the politics back into the Labour government when I stood for deputy leader back in September last year. I think I was absolutely right to identify that sort of gap, making sure that the political issues were really aired at the top of the government, that our party, our movement, our MPs, their voice was really heard and listened to as well at the top of the party. That was the real gap at that time, and I think I've made some good progress with that. I have also seen some of the limitations with that, which is that when some decisions then go into the government machine, and they perhaps come out in a way that you hadn't thought they would, you're not necessarily able to influence those as much as possible. But look, I'm deputy leader of the Labour Party. I'm directly elected by members, trade unions, and MPs, and I have my own kind of mandate in that job. And I want to make sure that we've got a successful Labour government that's really delivering on our values and delivering on our promise, not just so that we can win the next election, but so that we can change people's lives for the better, and we can defeat some of the populist politics that we've seen, that's offering people false promise and easy answers that can't be delivered on. And I will continue to do that as deputy leader, whatever happens in the coming weeks. And I'm happy to contribute in whatever way necessary to make sure that happens.
So you are available. I mean, you've been talking about the way Keir Starmer's government has worked, about the unpleasant atmosphere of briefings, rather sort of male-dominated boys' club. And are you convinced that Andy Burnham will be able to end that?
Well, I mean, I have to say that things, that whole atmosphere and some of that culture had significantly improved in recent months. With I think Keir himself was determined to do some of that, but it goes deeper and wider. It goes to really respecting difference, to having a broad church, the government of all the talents, ensuring that we really are listening to the communities that we each individually represent through our MPs and our other wider movement, and so that we hear what's going on the ground and we're able to adapt and change. I think I've been really pleased with some of the things that Andy Burnham has spoken about in this regard, in teaching to the next leader. And we all have to work together to make that a reality, because actually sort of saying things and then actually doing them are two different things, and we will need to make sure that we work. That will be something that we judged over time, and make sure that happens.
Are you one of those who would say that you can't have more Miliband's in the top jobs in government than women?
Well, look, I'm really not going to speculate on the makeup of the next cabinet at all. But look, I mean, as I say, I think one of the things I've been heartened to hear from Andy is a determination that, yes, it's his sort of vision and ideas and political direction as leader of Paul, but that is represented in a broad church government that includes all the talents, that represents all parts of our party, all parts of the country, and also, is a diverse government as well. And that's actually not as easy as it sounds to sort of pull off. But I'm pleased that I've heard him talk about in that regard so far, and I'm sure he'll live up to that.
I mean, I think Keir Starmer had a 50% women in the cabinet rule. Yeah. Does that still stand, do you think, for the new cabinet?
I'm not sure if it was a rule, but I mean, absolutely. We've got lots of great women in the Labour Party. We have got a woman leader. We haven't had a woman leader yet. We've got some really outstanding women colleagues coming through, as well as those that are more experienced. And as I say, we've also got people from lots of different backgrounds. And the one thing I hear more than most really from colleagues is, they want to see that people are doing jobs that they've got experience of, that they're passionate about, that they're committed to. And often we don't, those quiet voices, perhaps not got the sharp elbows pushing themselves to the front or talking to the media about how great they are. And we know, lots of people do that. Those quiet voices often are people that have had 20, 25 years experience in a particular field, or have been running a campaign in their constituency about a particular policy and really been, deep dive into all of those issues. And perhaps that's not known about, and people don't realise they've got something to bring to the table. And I think, look, politics doesn't really work like that, like we do in the real world, where people apply for jobs and they're assessed and they have interviews and they're given feedback and they're given a job or not. We don't tend to work like that in politics. But I think if we can move a bit more in that direction and really have an understanding of what people are bringing to the table, and really judge them not on what faction they're in, what grouping they're in, what friendship group they're in, whether they drink with certain people at the bar or not, and all of that kind of thing, but actually having round pegs in round holes, people who want to contribute to really changing this country for the better.
And does rebalancing and devolution mean that there would be an even greater imbalance in terms of the money, tax money generated in London and the southeast? More of that still going to places like the northeast and the northwest?
Well, we really shouldn't see these things as zero sum games. The fastest growing region in
But I mean,
favour.
the whole idea of rebalancing is seeing it as a zero sum game, isn't it?
Well, no, because it's not a zero sum games, because one of the real problems that's held back growth in this country has been poor productivity and an unequal regional economy, where other parts of the country outside of London and the southeast haven't been reaching their full potential, because they haven't had some of the long-term investment, they haven't had some of the decision making that's needed for their area to create jobs and growth. We've been lucky enough in Greater Manchester, not lucky enough, but in Greater Manchester we have had much greater devolution for the last 10, 15 years, and that has led to the fastest growth and increased productivity in the UK. And so that's why it's not a zero sum game, because it's about lifting all boats in order that the entire country is really able to grow and prosper and make its contribution as well. And devolution is an absolutely critical part to doing that, because we've seen that here in Greater Manchester, and we could have gone further, and we can go further even here if we had more control over things like the skills system, more over transportation like trains and so on as well. We could go even further with that. So I think that's a really compelling vision and story about how we bring the lifeblood back into communities right across the country that have perhaps been left behind for too long.
Finally, the Sunday Times today has an exclusive story detailing how a man called George Cotterill has given Nigel Farage and continues to give Nigel Farage considerable benefits in kind, with very little of that having been declared to the parliamentary authorities. Do you think that should be added to the investigation into the leader of reform currently underway by House of Parliament authorities?
Well, absolutely, I do. This article and this investigation leaves some very, very serious questions, and either Nigel Farage has mistakenly completely misunderstood the rules, or has deliberately misunderstood the rules, but he has misunderstood the rules of declaration and transparency. The whole reason that we are bound to declare things whilst we're MPs, but also for the 12 months before we become MPs, whether or not we had aspirations to become an MP in that time or not, is so that we can be completely transparent and open about any conflicts of interest, about any suggestion that people have given us money or things in kind, or supported us in some way, and are expecting some kind of return on that. Just to say, well, they're not expecting it, and when they first started giving me money, I wasn't actually standing to be an MP. That is not sufficient, I'm afraid. The rules are very, very clear about that. We have declarations, we have transparency for a reason, and it's so that the public can have absolute confidence that we aren't receiving gifts in kind, donations, or anything else from people that then may affect the decision making or the issues that we raise in Parliament. And I think this really does need some urgent looking into.
Lucy Powell, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.